I wanted to make a quick note about the stole that is here. This is actually my purple stole, my Lent stole that I wear, and it's draped over the lectern in part because I thought it would clash with the red, but also because my mother made it. And so as I preach upon the faith that my mother has wrapped around me as an ordained preacher in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. So this morning's gospel story, it's jam-packed with things to talk about in just 5 verses. But all of it revolves around religious and political intrigue, calculated maneuvering, carefully crafted messaging, and lament over the turbulent times that that Jerusalem was living through. Just wait, there's more. At the beginning of the story, we hear that the Pharisees have come to visit Jesus. Now, often in Luke, when the Pharisees come to visit, it's to argue with Jesus, which, after next week's intro to New Testament class, you'll know that's part of honoring teachers in the Jewish traditions, and in academic traditions, I might add, so go ahead and argue. To argue in the biblical tradition is to be a friend of God. And this morning, the Pharisees come to Jesus as friends, it seems, to warn him. Herod has it in for you. Of course, in our usual stories about Jesus and Pharisees, we're shocked at this warning, because we so often decide that arguing with Jesus or even asking really tough questions of Jesus is disrespectful, disobedient, even blasphemous. We're baffled at the Pharisees' warning. Why, in our usual imagination, would the Pharisees come warn Jesus about Herod? Shouldn't Herod and the Pharisees be on the same anti-Jesus side of the political aisle? Aren't we who love Jesus supposed to hate the Pharisees? Here's the first place where things start to get a whole lot messy in today's scripture. The Pharisees, you see, actually had very little power in first century Judea. They were this new, plucky group of religiously sincere people trying to bring reform for their people. And like any new political group does, they were seeking and looking for powerful political allies. But Herod wasn't one of them. In fact, the Pharisees barely registered on Herod's radar screen. Herod, being the ruler of Judea, whose power was propped up by the by the Roman Empire, the Pharisees knew that Herod was not their friend. He had it in for Jesus. If you find yourself a target of an emperor or his lackeys in the Roman world, you must, though, have more power than they actually do. So perhaps we need to rethink our perceptions of the Pharisees. They recognize that Jesus must have something to pay attention to if Herod is paying attention to them. They may not always agree with each other, but their goals for living in God's presence and showing God's mercy in the world, these goals aligned with Jesus and his followers. So they decide to warn Jesus and his followers about Herod. Now, Jesus and his followers know all too well the plots and anger and systemic oppression and violence and terrorism that non-Roman people face. Earlier in chapter 13, they've heard that Pilate, who's a Roman official and Herod's archenemy, everybody doesn't like Herod. Nobody likes him. That Pilate has mingled the blood of executed Judeans, Jesus' own people, with their sacrifices. Rumors and innuendos and lies and horrifying inhuman hatred seem to be coming from multiple places. Does this sound familiar? Jesus and his followers know the politics of this situation. They're right there in the middle. Jesus gives the Pharisees a message to relay to Herod. You tell that fox. Go tell that fox, he says, that I've got way more important work to do. Healing the sick, releasing people from systems of evil. And besides, I bet that fox, Herod, doesn't even know the real people living real lives outside of Jerusalem. Soon enough, Jesus will return to Jerusalem and the showdown will begin. But in the meantime, Jesus has more important things to do than to play Herod's sly, foxy games. But Jesus also knows the way of foxes. He knows that a fox in the chicken yard will make sure he gets his chicken dinner. Jesus and probably the Pharisees both knows that he can't protect his beloved Jerusalem or the people dear to him who live there, especially not from Herod and the Romans. He knows the limits of his power, and so his response is lament. And here's the second place where our text goes a little topsy-turvy this morning. Jesus laments that his people do not see the corruption in front of them. He laments that they choose comfort, privilege, connections to power over mercy for the vulnerable, care for the community, kindness for the stranger. You see, lament is not anger or violent response. It's more purposeful than that. Jesus' lament goes way back to the prophets and God's messengers of old. Jesus builds community, solidarity with those who have faced these same foxes in the past. Jesus laments that he will not change Jerusalem's fate under Herod the fox's rule. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. His lament weaves a gorgeous metaphor of a mother hen drawing her chicks to her for protection from Herod the fox. Only the chicks are not cooperating. It's a classic metaphor, foxes and hens. The fox, wanting a delicious chicken dinner, stealthily slinks its way into the flock and snatches one of the young ones for his feast. Throughout world literature, foxes are suspicious, wily, sly, a symbol of danger lurking unseen. Hens, on the other hand, are nurturing, protective of their young and vulnerable, a symbol of those most easily preyed upon. And so this morning in our gospel reading, we have a tale of foxes and hens, of Herod's rampage through Jerusalem and Jesus' womb-deep desire to protect the city and its people from Herod's terror. This is also a favorite metaphor for chapel services like this one during Women's History Month when we celebrate women's roles in our collective histories. This metaphor of foxy Herod and mother hen Jesus, it's one of the few distinctively female metaphors, perhaps the only explicit one, that Jesus uses in our Gospels. Jesus compares himself to a mother hen whose instincts to protect her brood run so deep that not acting on those instincts summons the deepest lament. Jesus, the heartbroken mother hen. Jesus, our mother. It's a striking image. So why don't we use it more often? You know I will. To answer this question, I went to the logical place, Google. And I learned a lot about chickens, and a fair bit about their relationship to foxes too. I watched how-to videos about making fox-proof chicken yards, hidden camera coverage of foxes invading the chicken coops, and those were not for the faint of heart. I saw descriptions of the way foxes prepare their chicken dinners. Let's just say, like us, they don't eat the beaks. And even a few moralizing children's fables about the industrious patience of hens and the sly deviousness of foxes. I read stories and saw videos about the habits of hens with their chicks, the different clucks that they give to signal different caretaking gestures, food, sleeping, danger. I saw them gather chicks under their wings, a la today's gospel, and even watched a few videos helping chicken owners teach their hens how to brood, that is, how to nurture chicks that are not their own. Since apparently hens don't just rush around trying to gather, protect, and mother just anyone's chicks. There are folk stories about mother hens sacrificing themselves for the sake of their chicks, whether it's to protect them from the fire or cold or foxes. These last two images, the mother hen gathering her chicks to comfort, warm, protect, and secure them, and of the self-sacrifice even to death, these last images we associate with Jesus' lament over Jerusalem in this morning's gospel. The idea of Jesus as comforter, protector, self-sacrificial shield runs through our collective theological imagination for millennia. And it's not a bad image. In fact, we need these images. But it's an image that still doesn't answer that question of why mother hen Jesus is not our go-to image of Jesus. You see, we have so few female metaphors connected with our tradition about who Jesus and God are. And because women are often not connected with divine images, we need this metaphor more than many of us really care to admit. What I mean is this. When we draw out this image of Jesus, the mothering hen, we often also insert all our ideals about who a mother is or should be. We assume that Luke is saying the same thing about Jesus and his relationship to us. We assume that Jesus is telling us that he is warm, kind, nurturing, patient, protective, gentle, loving, snuggly, secure, and safe. And added to these characteristics of our ideal mother, we heap onto the metaphor all of our other easy stereotypes and tame, sanitized, whitewashed mother memes. Mother hen Jesus thus becomes the patron saint for women. It's lovely, wonderful, it's beautiful. So why do I feel ambivalent about this great feminist metaphor? This image we construct of mother hen Jesus tells us more about our stereotypes of who women are and should be than about the actual metaphor that Jesus uses this morning. Of course, it's understandable. We need to connect with this image of Jesus, our mother, because it's our lifeline to the divine. You see, women are asked to connect fully with male-identified metaphors for God all the time. But men are rarely asked to identify with female-identified ones. So when we do have one in our readings, we feel obligated to celebrate and embrace it. But friends, I am nobody's mother by choice. Even if in practice I do some mother things. School lunches, anyone? And while some of you do connect with the distinctive experience that is mothering, some of us never can or will. So how does this image still speak to those of us who do not mother, to those of us who cannot mother? In all those videos that I watched of hens gathering chicks under their wings, honestly, I didn't think the mother hens were all that soothing. Those chicks, they were crammed in, beaks and all, around the hen's feet, claws and all, right? And on the underside of the hen, not only was she subject to the beaks and claws, but remember the underside is the part that sits in the dirt and produces, well, chicken dirt. It really doesn't look pleasant to be gathered under Mama Hen when the fox is lurking about. And Mama Hen, she's not exactly kind or patient. She's beaking orders to the intruders and scooping runaway chicks, and quite frankly, she just looks scary. Some chicken farmers will tell you that the reason a mother hen sits on her chicks is to make herself look bigger, badder, more terrifying to anything threatening, like a fox. In other words, according to chicken logic, Jesus' metaphor is not the kind, nurturing, meek, mild, infinitely compassionate mother hen. Rather, she is a fierce, bold, unflinching, I'm bigger than you, so don't mess with my brood kind of hen. Now, none of this idea of the fierce hen fits with our picture of womanhood or motherhood in the traditional kinds of ways. So, what's going on with this morning's scripture? We got Pharisees we've got Pharisees who we thought had it in for Jesus, warning him of Foxy Herod's grievances and thirst for vengeance. And we've got mother hen Jesus, who isn't exactly, well, motherly. This is where I think we have to turn back to the lament. Jesus lamenting the violence, exploitation, Roman authoritarianism, opportunism of the Jerusalem of his day. Jesus noting that the sly fox Herod types have always killed the prophets and stoned God's messengers. Jesus noting mother hen God has always wanted to protect her people. Jesus lamenting for those of us who are chicks in the brood. What I have failed to see all along in my usual readings of this text is that I am neither Foxy Herod nor mother hen Jesus. And neither are you. This metaphor isn't about identifying with the powerful players in the story. This metaphor is about how we chicks, the brood who follow Jesus, this metaphor is about how we follow, about our solidarity, our alignment with Jesus' mission of mercy for the vulnerable, kindness for the stranger, justice for the oppressed. This metaphor is about how we collectively crawl under those wings and help create the fierce mother hen Jesus, whose presence our world so desperately needs, because a fox is about.